Tonight, a man shot and killed on Palm Breeze Drive. The car left in the middle of the street as police try to determine exactly what happened. A delegation heads to the climate change conference COP27 in Egypt tonight, but with one government official noticeably missing from the itinerary. A primary school principal faces an assault charge after an on-campus incident back in December. And then in our news at 7:30, a man accused of molesting his daughter gets a new trial date after police can't find the child and mother. We've got the details straight ahead. Our news live at 7 starts now. Our news live at 7. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kendino Knowles. Police heading into the weekend with another murder on their hands. A shooting in broad daylight on Palm Breeze Drive today, leaving neighbors shaken and asking for beefed up police patrols. Berthany McDermott gets us started tonight.
Now, according to Chief Superintendent of Police Michael Johnson, the brazen daylight shooting occurred just behind me shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon. Johnson telling reporters today they got the word from residents who heard gunshots in the area.
They came out to investigate and met a vehicle in the middle of the street. There was a male in the vehicle who appeared to be suffering from a gunshot injury to the upper body. EMS personnel were called. They checked that body and found no signs of life.
Now, not much details to go on with this latest incident, but Johnson also telling reporters that police believe the victim is in his early 20s. We spoke to one resident of the area who says incidents like these are out of the ordinary.
I mean, a concern about it happening for real now, but then just to say through this area, ain't no big concern because there ain't not much happening like that around here. You don't hardly see people around here much other than the traffic. You know, so that ain't no major concern.
The longtime resident also calling on police to beef up patrols in the area.
Well, we can need more police presence, you know what I mean, just to feel safe, you know what I mean, because you never know who they might have been, if they might come back or whatever's been going on, you know. So police presence will make us feel even better.
Now, police are appealing to anyone that can assist them in solving this latest incident to contact them. Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Thanks, Berthany. Meanwhile, the latest crime statistics from Grand Bahama showing a spike in criminal activity there. Officer in charge of that island's Criminal Investigation Department, Detective Superintendent Darrell Weir, sharing those numbers today.
Although the department have recorded an increase in crime matters, we are also currently experiencing an 80% plus solvency rate in matters having successfully been investigated and person placed formally before the court for these matters.
And the detective superintendent says there are several categories trending up.
To date, there's been a slight increase in serious crime matters reported within the Grand Bahama district, which includes murder, attempted murder, armed robberies, rape, unlawful sexual intercourse, and fraud matters, which compared to last year. So we have a slight increase. Our armed robberies are up. We had quite a few, as you know. We had a concern with the rape early part of the year, and also to date we have 6 murders, and 4 of those have been successfully closed, and we have 2 outstanding.
The Grand Bahama officer also giving an update on several high-profile investigations. To find out more, be sure and stay tuned for Our News at 7:30. Opposition leader Michael Pintard hitting back at National Security Minister Wayne Munroe over his comments this week that he was not satisfied with the management of the Office of Public Prosecutions. Munroe told reporters at Cabinet Tuesday he had concerns about how the office is being run. The list of concerns include murder suspects getting bail. Pintard says it's comments like this that undermines the work of senior civil servants.
Whether intended or unintended, it intimidates senior public servants. That's what it does. Intimidates them.
Embattled school principal Olivia Daxon will stand trial for an alleged assault on a teacher at Thelma Gibson Primary School back in December. Prosecutors say the 50-year-old assaulted Shanique Sweeting back on September 12th. The day after the alleged assault, teachers walked off the job calling for Daxon's dismissal. She wasn't let go, but as protests continued, she took vacation leave on October 12th. She pleaded not guilty during the arraignment before Magistrate Shaka Seville today and was released on her own recognizance. Well, we've got more from the courts coming up in a moment, but for now, we head over to meteorologist Greg Thompson, who is standing by in the Weather Center with a look at temperatures across the islands. Greg?
Thanks, Kinduna, and welcome everybody for our first check on weather on this nice and comfortable Friday night. Temperature 82 degrees outside our studios right now in the partly cloudy skies. A little bit breezy out there, northeast winds at 50 miles per hour, and your feel slight temperature a very comfortable 83 degrees. Temperatures around the islands tonight, 80 in Freeport, we pick up 76 in Marsh Harbor, Abaco, 81 in Alistown, Bimini. Over in Great Harbor Key, 82 also in Nichols Sound, Andros, as well as here in the capital. Over in Governor's Harbor, you guys are 81. Central Bahamas, 83 in Kemps Bay. We pick up 82s in Arthurstown, Cat Island, and in Georgetown. Over in Coburn Townsend, Salvador, 75, 82 in Deadman's Key. Southeast Bahamas, also reflective of those temperatures we've been having throughout the remainder of the islands. 83 in Donkertown, Ragged Island. Colonel Hill, Cricket Island, 76, 79 in Delectable Bay, Acklands. 76 also in Abrams Bay. We pick up 78 in Matthewtown, Inagua, and neighbors of the southeast Turks and Caicos Islands. You are 83 at this hour. Satellite view, quiet around the islands. We do have that surface high pressure still in charge, but we are watching an area of low pressure that's developing to the east of the islands. Some showers will be rotating around that, so we're looking at some spotty showers across the islands tonight. But as that system continues to drift towards the north, National Hurricane Center will continue to monitor this one, giving it a very medium chance actually for formation over the next couple of days and into next week. We'll tell you more about that later on in the forecast. That's your first check at weather, a look at the tropics, and your extended forecast is still to come.
Thanks, Greg. And still to come on our news, we'll tell you how the Grand Bahama Port Authority wants to clean up the island one abandoned vehicle at a time. And an agency fair is cutting the red tape and making it easier for Grand Bahama residents to access government services. And an official delegation en route to COP27 in Egypt without the environment minister. We'll tell you why when our news returns. A 29-year-old Grand Bahama man received bail today after violating the terms of his existing bail. Shaquirio Jones was ordered to pay $9,000 after he pleaded not guilty to bail violations for failing to charge his electronic monitoring device. Magistrate Simone Bowe heard the case. Jones is expected back in court in January. Meanwhile, a tip leading police to a drug find on Yamacraw Hill Road Thursday. Officers from the Eastern Division say they found 15 pounds of suspected marijuana with an estimated street value of $15,000. No one has been arrested. Well, 3 years since Hurricane Dorian, and derelict vehicles in Grand Bahama are still eyesores in some places. Removing them remains a priority for the Grand Bahama Port Authority, as our Jamila Missick found out.
Hurricane Dorian left thousands of vehicles on Grand Bahama damaged. GBPA Vice President of Building and Development Services, Nikira Wilchcombe, says they've engaged licensees who have the ability to process and export the vehicles.
Unfortunately, I know the market right now is not as favorable for that particular commodity, but we are we're continuing to work with the stakeholders to ensure that the process of removing vehicles off the island continues. A significant amount have have been moved already, and so we applaud the stakeholders who have been engaged in that process.
Wilchcombe says the GBPA's City Maintenance and Management Department continues to tag vehicles for removal.
We are just even appealing to persons who have vehicles in their yard. Unfortunately, we cannot go into yards to collect vehicles, so they would have to put it on the verge and have to give consent that that is a vehicle that they would want to be a part of the process as well.
Now, back in June, hundreds of vehicles stored in a junkyard at Kent Motors went up in flames. Wilchcombe says the GBPA is discouraging these type of facilities as they want to now eliminate the creation of additional storage areas in the city.
That's from an environmental standpoint, a safety standpoint, and certainly from a criminal element standpoint, because we've seen the recent fires as a result of the theft and vandalism as well. And so we do not want these types of storage areas sprawling throughout the city to cause also that, like I said, the environmental and criminal elements that are associated with them.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jamila Missick.
And still on Grand Bahama, several government agencies are trying to make more accessible public services. A government agency fair will happen on Saturday. It will give the public service access to the National Insurance Board, Social Services Ministry, the Ministry of Social Services, and the Road Traffic Department, among other agencies. 17 agencies in all will be on hand for the fair. It's spearheaded by West Grand Bahama District Council. It starts at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at the 8 Mile Rock Gym. West Grand Bahama Administrator Ricardo Ferguson and Senior Manager at the National Insurance Board in Grand Bahama, Sophia Carey, explains.
The issue of property is one that is great, and I think that can be cleared up. The other one that I think is very, very, very pressing down there, other than immigration, is this issue of the various documents, travel documents.
So many people come into our doors who do not have an understanding of what their benefits are. They pay their national insurance basically every month or sometimes weekly, depending on their employer, but they don't have any idea or appreciation for what it is that they're paying for.
And for parents needing assistance, a school welfare officer will be in place to offer help. Rochelle Minnis is Chief Welfare Officer in the Ministry of Social Services.
You might have a question as relate to how do I obtain lunch program at our school. You might have a question about how to obtain uniform assistant, or just how do I get my child into the government preschool.
We want to really ensure that every citizen, everybody feels welcome. Yes. Everybody understand that this is not for one group.
When our news comes back from the break, we turn our spotlight to stories making headlines across the world as voters in the United States get set to head to the polls for midterm elections next week. Plus, Egypt is the destination for COP27 as the Prime Minister and a delegation make their way to the North African country. The press secretary lays out the agenda. And on this day in 2001, Hurricane Michelle crept up on us late in the season. What we've learned since then. It's all coming up when Our News returns. This is Our News. Welcome back. Our attention turning now to stories making headlines across the world. U.S. officials on the front line of the voting process are defending the integrity of the local, state, and national elections as complaints pile up ahead of next Tuesday's midterm elections. In blue Democratic states like Idaho and Oregon, investigators are looking into growing voter complaints, many of them stemming from the unfounded complaints of the 2020 election. In Oregon, at least 204 complaints have been filed this year alone, ranging from accusations of campaign finance violations and campaigning by public service employees. A French far-right lawmaker is serving a 15-day suspension for a racist remark during a legislative session, prompting condemnation from across the political spectrum. Gregor Defona was heard shouting the words, "Return to Africa," at a fellow lawmaker who is black. Carlos Belongo was challenging the French government about migrants stranded at sea. Belongo says he's deeply hurt by the remark. Other politicians, including France's president, said they were shocked. A European parliamentary committee investigating the use of spyware in the 27-country bloc asked Greek officials Friday to do more to shed light on a phone surveillance scandal that targeted opposition politicians and journalists. The scandal shook Greece's center-right government this year and surrounds the National Intelligence Service tapping the phones of opposition party leaders. The Prime Minister says he was unaware of the operation, which he says was legal, but wrong. 70 tourists on a riverboat in Peru detained by an indigenous group in protest to a recent oil spill. The UK Foreign Office says a very small number of their nationals are among those on the boat. Peruvian, Swiss, American, Spanish, and French nationals are also believed to be among those stranded. They are not thought to have been harmed since they were taken on Thursday. Meanwhile, an earthquake registering 6.1 shook Mexico's Baja California peninsula early Friday with no reports of damage or injuries. The U.S. Geological Survey reports the epicenter at 50 miles south-southwest of Bahia de Quino in the Gulf of California. The Civil Defense Agency says the initial tsunami alert issued by the Mexican Navy showed no notable variation in sea level. And finally, Brazil's outgoing President Jair Bolsonaro on Thursday met briefly with the envoy coordinating the transfer of power to Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva 4 days after Bolsonaro's tight election loss. The outcome has sparked protests by his supporters amid his refusal to publicly concede. His chief of staff told reporters he received authorization from the incumbent for the process to proceed. The meeting between the two sides launches the process that will culminate with Da Silva's inauguration on January 1st. Well, Prime Minister Philip Davis is leading a delegation to COP27 in Egypt this evening. Press Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, Clint Watson, confirming that the Prime Minister is to deliver a speech on Tuesday. His focus will be the continued fight against climate change. Watson also addressing questions about the size of the delegation the PM is leading.
There's 70 people representing the Bahamas at COP27, not 70 people from government going to COP27. All right. The matter of fact, the private sector makes up a larger portion of the delegation going to COP, with some 37 persons from the private sector who will be going from various youth organizations, various NGOs, environmental groups, and individual persons as well. They make up a larger portion of that. Prime Minister will travel with a delegation of 10 with himself on Friday. The only other minister traveling to COP27 will be Minister Clay Sweeting, who's going to play a very heavy role in a considerable effort on agriculture and food security.
Notably absent from that delegation, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources Vaughn Miller, as well as State Minister Basil McIntosh. But according to Watson, Miller is at another international event and could not account for McIntosh's absence.
He is presently at another climate conference that's in Canada. That's where he is, and he'll be there as well into next week. There are a lot of technical things that have to be in place and that must be negotiated. So this year's COP27 takes along a more technical line, and that's why we have such a strong presence of technical officers who are there, because they're the ones who have been working on the documents. They're the ones who have been at the various meetings throughout the year, negotiating, understanding what's required to be in place, in order to ensure that we have that kind of presence there, to make sure that we sign onto these agreements, that we're there around the table.
Still to come on our news, today in history, find out interesting facts about the day that was November 4th and the anniversary of the United States electing its first black president. Plus, Greg is back in the Weather Center with your extended forecast. And then in our news at 7:30, Grand Bahama police say they're ready to roll out new crime-fighting initiatives on that island. We'll tell you how when our news returns. Welcome back to our news. It's time now to turn our spotlight on events that shaped the day that was November 4th, including the rise of one president and the fall of another. Take a look. On November 4th, 1979, Iranian militants seized the United States Embassy in Tehran and captured 90 hostages. 52 were held captive for 444 days. Political analysts cited the standoff as a major factor in the continuing downfall of Jimmy Carter's presidency and his landslide loss in the 1980 presidential election. Speaking of that election, the Republican Ronald Reagan was elected U.S. president on November 4th, 1980, defeating the incumbent Democrat Jimmy Carter. Former U.S. President Reagan is seen in this October 19, 1983 filed photo addressing a news conference in Washington, D.C. Plus, in 2001, the first film adaptation of J.K. Rowling's best-selling Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, premiered in London. The film went on to make more than $974.7 million at the international box office. It picked up 3 Academy Award nominations and validated the production of 7 subsequent big-screen installments. And on November 4th, 2008, Democrat Barack Obama won a grueling 2-year struggle for the White House, beating Republican John McCain to become the first black president in U.S. history. The 47-year-old Democrat garnered 365 electoral college votes and nearly 53% of the popular vote, while his 72-year-old Republican challenger captured 173 electoral votes and more than 45% of the popular vote. And on the same day in 2004, best-selling U.S. author Michael Crichton, who wrote novels such as Jurassic Park and created the popular TV drama ER, died. Crichton is shown in this May 2000 file photograph as police search for 2 armed men who tied up the Jurassic Park author and his 13-year-old daughter. Well, 21 years ago this week, the strongest storm of the 2001 season, Hurricane Michelle, made landfall in Cuba and eventually the Bahamas. Marlena Leonard, she recalls it for us tonight.
While the hurricane season doesn't end until November 30th, most people don't expect trouble from the Atlantic after the peak of the season passes in mid-October. That was the mindset in 2001, but in the end, November turned out the strongest storm of the season, Hurricane Michelle. More than 700,000 people evacuated before Hurricane Michelle tore through Cuba as a Category 4, the strongest storm they'd seen in almost 50 years, with heavy storm surge and reports of 15-foot waves. Thanks to the early evacuations, casualties were relatively low, with 5 lives lost, but damages amounted to almost $2 billion. We were also impacted here in the Bahamas once Hurricane Michelle had weakened. Forecaster Wayne Neely tells our tale of the storm.
When it ran over the mountains of Cuba, it was downgraded to a Category 1, which is what we in the Bahamas got. We got a 90-mile-per-hour storm, which was a Category 1 storm.
Even as a Category 1, news reports from the time talk of storm surge and flooding, causing some Nassau residents to move to the second floor. And for more than one generation of Nasuvians, Hurricane Michelle was their first experience with a direct hit.
Some people went out during the storm when I passed over New Providence, and some people believed that the storm was over. And I remember persons had to go on the radio and explain to those persons, look, the storm is not over. That's the eye you're experiencing, because most persons were not familiar with the passage of the night. The last storm that we had in New Providence at that time that actually made a direct impact on New Providence was probably the 1929 hurricane.
While we were spared the full strength of Hurricane Michelle's force, she didn't breeze through unnoticed. Across the archipelago, reports of roofs torn off, flooding, and dangerous wind-blown debris came out after the storm's passage. Earlier this week, Hurricane Lisa hit Belize as a Category 1 hurricane, and just this morning, the National Hurricane Center marked a disturbance over the Bahamas with a 40% chance of development. A reminder to stay prepared until the official end of the hurricane season on November 30th. Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
All right, thanks for that reporting, Marlena. To watch that story again and for all of today's top stories, visit ournews.bs. That does it for us at News at 7. Joining us now is Italia Hall with the latest headlines. Italia?
Thanks so much, Ken. Interesting story by Marlena on Hurricane Michelle.
Yeah, and to her point, we've not had a storm this season to hit our shores, and really just grateful.
So grateful.
Grateful that we didn't, right?
Yeah,
especially
after Hurricane Dorian, right?
We continue to reel from that, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks so much. And we've got more to get to tonight, including the country's latest murder and the rise in crime in Grand Bahama. Crime on Grand Bahama has increased over the past 2 years, but police say there are also more crimes. How police are addressing crime on that island. And a resolution is on the way for social services workers after 2 days of protests. The state minister gives us an idea of what that means and when. And forecasters keeping an eye on a disturbance in the Atlantic that may impact the Bahamas early next week. Our meteorologist Greg Thompson is on standby.
The Minister of Health, the Minister with responsibility for price control, and the country's Attorney General all meeting with the Bahamas Pharmaceutical Association yesterday. They say that meeting was constructive and they've come to a resolution, at least for the next 3 months. I'm Megan Shepard and I have the details straight ahead on Our News.
Our News at 7:30 starts in a moment. Welcome to Our News and thank you for joining us. I'm Italia Hall. Police are looking for the shooter responsible for a brazen daylight murder on Palm Breeze Drive in the Carmichael Road area. The victim, an unidentified man. People in the area reported hearing gunshots and called police. Chief Superintendent Michael Johnson talking to reporters on the scene.
They came out to investigate and met a vehicle in the middle of the street. There was a male in the vehicle who appeared to be suffering from a gunshot injury to the upper body. EMS personnel were called. They checked that body and found no signs of life.
According to Johnson, the victim is believed to be in his early 20s. One resident who did not want to be on camera telling Our News that while the incident is unusual, he feels increased police presence would help.
Well, we can need more police presence, you know what I mean, but just to feel safe, you know what I mean, because you never know who they might have been, if they might come back or whatever has been going on, you know. So police presence will make us feel even better.
In Grand Bahama, the statistics showing an increase in crime. Police releasing those numbers for the first time this year while updating the press on some of the biggest investigations on that island. Marlena Leonard is on that story.
Officer in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department in Grand Bahama, Detective Superintendent Darrell Ware, presented the first GB-specific statistics so far for the year, including a breakdown of their main issues.
To date, there's been a slight increase in serious crime matters reported within the Grand Bahama district, which includes murder, attempted murder, armed robberies, rape, unlawful sexual intercourse, and fraud matters, which compared to last year. Although the department have recorded an increase in crime matters, we are also currently experiencing 80% plus solvency rate in matters having successfully been investigated and person placed formally before the court for these matters.
We're also offered updates on some of Grand Bahama's biggest ongoing investigations, like accused killer Kendrick Hanna's whereabouts. Hanna disappeared after being released on bail for the 2019 murder of single mother Monet Darville.
He was placed before the court. He was remanded to B-Docks. He was then released on bail. After that, for more information, he ran away. Since then, we put a red notice out where we reach out to our counterparts through Interpol, and they are assisting us. The whole world through Interpol will be on the lookout and hope to bring him successful and return him to the Bahamas where he'll face the charges.
And the skeletal remains found in Tynes Bay are now in the hands of a pathologist.
No later than yesterday, we spoke with her, and we're just waiting to get an update from her as the direction we're going.
And here was Ware's main message to the public heading into the holiday season.
Continue to wait for your police. We are your friend, and we'll do our best to try to keep you safe. We intend to be the Grinch that stole Christmas from these criminals.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Marlena Leonard.
Shot spotters, CCTV footage, and Marco Alert digital billboards are soon to be a part of the crime-fighting and investigation arsenal of Grand Bahama's police force. Deputy Commissioner Theophilus Cunningham.
On Wednesday, the 26th of October 2022, personnel from Motorola and the Royal Bahamas Police Force technical staff completed the groundwork for the second phase of the implementation of the aforementioned technical resources.
The acting deputy commissioner also speaking to some of the benefits of the new technology.
ShotSpotter is a firearm discharge detection technology that uses sophisticated sensors to detect, locate, and alert law enforcement agencies of illegal firearms activities as it happens. Closed-circuit television is designed to increase surveillance by making it easier for the police to monitor the behavior of potential criminals. With the successful implementation of the Marcos Alert digital billboard, Grand Bahama citizens are expected to become more aware in quick time in relation to urgent bulletin alerts.
57-year-old Torsten Wilhelm Hendrik of Germany is the man identified from that murder in Andros on Wednesday. Assistant Commissioner of Police Kenwood Taylor telling Our News that police are following positive leads. Now, during that incident on Wednesday, police say 3 men, all Germans, were outside their summer home when a masked gunman approached as they tried to get inside. The suspect opened fire, hitting 2 of them. The shooter then fled and the victims were taken to the local clinic. Hendrik was pronounced dead. The other was airlifted to New Providence. Police also officially identifying several of the recent homicide victims. In the latest incident, police identified 42-year-old Patrice Sawyer as the woman who was gunned down early Monday morning in front of her home on Johnson Road. Just a day before, 32-year-old Andrew Burrows and 27-year-old Lakeithra Stubbs were killed on Sunday after 2 men armed with a high-powered weapon fired several shots at a crowd in the Rock Crusher area. 2 others were wounded during that incident. Then on Saturday, 45-year-old Fred LaFay was fatally shot by a man in a small Japanese vehicle, fatally wounding him. That incident happening through 6th Street, Coconut Grove. Now, all of these murders are under active investigation. A judge has set a second trial date for the 48-year-old man accused of molesting his 2-year-old daughter as police continue to search for her mother. Prosecutors allege that the man, who cannot be named for legal reasons, sexually abused his daughter on January 7th. A jury was impaneled to hear his case in July. However, Senior Justice Bernard Turner discharged the jury after the now 4-year-old's mother, her legal guardian, refused to bring her to court. An arrest warrant remains outstanding for the mother, who has moved and withdrawn her daughter from school after expressing concern about the inability of police to find the woman and her child. Turner set a new trial date of February 13, 2023. Embattled School Principal Olivia Daxon will stand trial for an alleged assault on a teacher at Thelma Gibson Primary School back in December. Prosecutors say the 50-year-old assaulted Shanique Sweeting at the school back on September 12th. The day after the alleged assault, teachers walked off the job and called for Daxon's dismissal. Daxon was not let go, but as protests continued, she took vacation leave on October 12th. She pleaded not guilty during an arraignment before Magistrate Shaker Seville today and was released. A disturbance in the Atlantic may threaten the Bahamas by early next week. Meteorologist Greg Thompson joins us now from the Weather Center with our current conditions. Good evening, Greg.
Thanks, Natalia, and happy TGIF, everybody. Beautiful conditions right now outside our studios right now. Partly cloudy skies, 82 degrees, the winds are a little breezy out of the northeast at 15 miles per hour, and your feels like temperature at 83. Quiet around the islands, we did have a couple of spotty showers moving across the northwest Bahamas, but there's an area of low pressure that's developing to the east of the islands. We will continue to watch that. National Hurricane Center giving that a medium chance for formation, so we are looking for some showers and thunderstorms continuing through the weekend and into early next week. That's your first check of weather. Stick with us, a look at the tropics, and your extended forecast is still to come.
Still to come on our news, social services workers may get good news soon, according to the minister responsible. We'll tell you why straight ahead. Plus, pharmacists say they are pleased with the solution they worked out with the government. What's next on the road to affordable medication? And hundreds of workers celebrate the wrap-up of Public Service Week. That's coming up when our news returns. Minister responsible for social services, Obi Wilchcombe, addressing those grievances which led to 2 days of protests by social services staff. Wilchcombe acknowledging the weight of the concerns and promising some good news soon. Berthany McDermott.
I'm working to ensure that they will have great Christmases.
Social Services Minister Obi Wilchcombe agreeing with members of the BPSU, admitting that some of the concerns expressed by the union must be resolved. Speaking ahead of this morning's parliamentary session, Wilchcombe said social services employees can expect a meeting in a matter of days with solutions to the vexing issues.
In fact, social services is closing on Monday between 10 and 12 because I have a staff meeting with the entire staff of social services with many announcements to be made. And so now this meeting was planned way before yesterday.
At the time, Wilchcombe said staffers were all aware of the meeting. On Wednesday, the BPSU explained its members have long been plagued with issues like the absence of promotions and many more needing to be regularized. Today, those members took their concerns to the office of the Prime Minister.
The reality is they are absolutely correct. Those are long-standing issues, and they have to be resolved. You have people working in social services who have been there now 13, 14, 20 years and such have not been confirmed. You have individuals who've gone off and qualified themselves, got degrees, and still not been compensated as a result.
As for talks with the bargaining agent, Wilchcombe says he spoke with the union as recently as last week. However, Wilchcombe says a tremendous amount of progress has been made to address the concerns.
We're asking the staff to deliver great service for the Bahamian people, and I have a tremendous love for the clients of our country and for the staff. But if we make a demand of the staff, then you got to take care of the staff.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
While State Public Service Minister Pia Glover-Roll promising some relief for those social services workers as well. She spoke to the matter as recently as this morning.
I want to assure them that within the next few weeks, yes, many of them have stated that they've been waiting for years, but within the next few weeks, they will be able to realize their promotions, their reclassifications, and their confirmations that they've been calling out for. That exercise is coming to a close, and we're happy to push the process forward.
Members of the Bahamas Public Services Union protested for 2 days this week over multiple outstanding issues. Glover-Roll, like Social Services Minister Obie Wilchcombe, says the concerns are legitimate.
They are absolutely right in being frustrated. I understand the frustration, I understand the angst, but we have committed to ensuring that public servants, all 22,000 of them, experience anything that they feel has been kept back from them in terms of promotions, in terms of reclassifications, in terms of confirmations. The Minister of Social Services, Minister Obie Wilchcombe, has been working closely with the technical team at his ministry over the past few months, along with public service, to ensure that we're processing the files of social services workers.
When Our News comes back from the break, a temporary agreement reached between governments and pharmacies after meeting behind closed doors.
Plus, coming up in Sports for you tonight, we'll give you a full breakdown and the latest from the BISS playoffs, sudden death action out of the way. We'll tell you who's into the championship round. We'll also tell you all about what's going on in soccer as the UB Mingos remain unbeaten in league play. That's all coming up in sports tonight.
And public service workers celebrate with a float parade. The highlights when Our News returns. This is Our News. Welcome back. A constructive agreement reached between the Bahamas Pharmaceutical Association and the government over new profit margins on certain medications. Now, the details were shared Thursday at the Office of the Prime Minister. Megan Shepard gets us caught up.
President of the Bahamas Pharmaceutical Association, Shantia McBride, says they are pleased to have come to a temporary solution with the government.
We came up with a positive and productive process in which the agreement was made with a livable outcome for pharmacy that can be sustained throughout the 3 months and beyond, as he indicated. So therefore, those that are most vulnerable in our country can now get some assistance or some relief within the pharmacy industry.
According to clinical pharmacist Gregor McPhee, the agreement also includes a partnership to educate the public.
One of the things that we know, a lot of Bahamians are not aware of possibly how to take their medication. So not only you couldn't really afford it, you weren't sure, you weren't compliant with it. So the pharmacy community has agreed to work with the government to ensure that going forward, long term, there will be a lot of educational campaigns happening and a lot of education being placed on how we can take better care of ourselves along with our medications.
In the original amendment, the government provided a maximum wholesale percentage markup of between 15% and 18%. Minister of Economic Affairs Michael Halkitis explains the new margins.
What we did basically split the difference. So we agreed on 20% for wholesale and 40% for retail. Bearing in mind we were ranging between 15 and 40 anyway, so it's virtually the same. But what we did was just to have the one margin for wholesale and one margin for retail.
However, the government did not agree to remove value-added tax off medication. Reporting for Our News, I'm Megan Shepard.
Thanks for that report, Megan. While opposition leader Michael Pintard suggests the Davis administration launches a commission of inquiry on the travel expenses of his administration, he wants the report compared to the expenses of the previous administration on which he served. During his contribution to the resolution to increase the minimum wage, Pintard took a jab at the government for what the opposition sees as excessive travel. In a recent voice note, Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell said one hopes Pintard can account for all his travel following Hurricane Dorian, and to that, Pintard said,
ask the good member who made the comment, is he prepared, and is the government prepared, and the Public Accounts Committee, we asked for it, release the information about historical travel and expenditure in those ministries, Madam Speaker. I said it before on beaches and parks. This hinting and drip feeding that you come in, you really? Why don't you come from the beginning?
Sudden death rounds of the private school softball playoffs all done after yesterday. Meanwhile, the perfect season continues for the Mingos in soccer. Here's Marcellus Hall with a check on sports.
All right, thanks, Natalia. Welcome to Our Sports on a Friday, everybody. I'm Marcellus Hall. The World Series continuing last night. Game 5 between the Houston Astros and the Philadelphia Phillies. Series was tied 2-2 going into last night. No team had won 2 in a row until last night. Justin Verlander on the mound. He got it done as Houston gets the victory. They are now 1 win away from being a World Series champion. Meanwhile, let's shift our attention to high school softball. Yesterday over at Freedom Farm, sudden death action. Boys played, junior boys and senior boys on the diamond. Let's take a quick look and see how it all turned out. BISS sudden death playoff action taking place yesterday over at Freedom Farm. Junior boys action first up. Good one here between Temple Christian and St. Augustine's College. Big Red Machine had gone unbeaten all year, but in a sudden death situation, they picked the wrong time to go cold. They lose 8-7. TC advances to the championship round. Sac left weeping into their pillows as they now have to go back to the drawing board for next season. Meanwhile, senior boys action. Nassau Christian Schools, formerly NCA, they took on St. John's. Winner moves on to the championship round. But how about Nassau Christian Schools getting the win here easily, 17-2 to foul. They go on to win in 3 innings. They will move on to the championship round to see how they do. Their championship begins on Monday. Meanwhile, the UB Mingos put their undefeated record on the line Wednesday night in the Bahamas Football Association against the Future Stars. Mingos came in 4-0, but they let the Stars score first. Midfielder Morgan Wood answered with his own goal in the 14th minute to even the game at 1-1. Midfielder Ronaldo Green then took the Mingos ahead with a brilliant goal in the 41st minute. They go on to hold that lead until the break 2-1. And then in the second half, Mingos goalkeepers and the defense getting it done. Mingos hold on to win 2-1. They stay undefeated. 5-0 now the record, as assistant coach Adam Miller said the match living up to expectations.
We expected to win. We expected a few more chances. We had clearly more chances than they did, but we didn't put our chances away in this particular game. I wouldn't say that we expected to be close. What we expected from the opposition was how they played. They're very fast, very dynamic. They play very direct.
And that's it to check on sports for you here on this Friday. I'm Marcellus Hall. Have a fabulous weekend. Back to you, Italia.
Still ahead on our news tonight, government workers show up and show out during Public Service Week. And what are your chances of rain this weekend? Greg has the answer when our news returns. Welcome back to our news. Is that disturbance in the Atlantic set to strengthen? Well, our Greg Thompson is back with your weekend weather planner. Greg?
Thanks again, Natalia, and welcome back, everybody. We are still tracking the tropics. Of course, Lisa is still a tropical depression, or basically it's going to be falling to pieces in a short while. Into the Gulf of Campeche, couple isolated showers still associated with that, but it's going to move into an area that's not really conducive, and it will continue to weaken. All eyes are now towards the east of the Bahamas, where a broad area of showers and thunderstorms associated with a broad low pressure, which is non-tropical right now, but it will continue to move towards the north, eventually moving more to north towards the northwest, should be impacting the Bahamas over the next couple of days and into early next week. The National Hurricane Center giving that a medium chance for formation, so this is a system that we will continue to monitor. It is likely to produce some showers and thunderstorms across the Bahamas early next week, so we're asking you boaters, beachgoers, and everybody continue to monitor this one. Broad low pressure system that was once Martin is producing some very strong swells, and those swells will continue to affect the Bahamas, and it's going to be challenging for the weekend, so we're asking you boaters to remain in port, especially in the northwest and central Bahamas, and beachgoers, we're advising you to not get into the waters. It's going to be a little dangerous out there, so do exercise extreme caution. Talking about that area that we are mentioning in our forecast, National Hurricane Center starting to give it a low chance now, but by the end of the weekend, it's going to be up to a medium chance for formation, so continue to listen to all advisories posted on the system. Boating conditions around the northwest and central Bahamas, as I mentioned, boaters to remain in port. Winds will be northeast to east at 15 to 20 knots, and they will be higher in gusts, especially across the northwest Bahamas. 4 to 6 foot seas expected, but up to 11 feet in some moderate to large swells, and those swells will be affecting mostly the Atlantic exposed shorelines. Low tide will be at 11:55 tonight. For the southeast Bahamas, an advisory posted for you guys down there, those swells affecting you as well. Northeast to east winds at 15 knots seas, 3 to 5 feet in sheltered areas, but up to 7 feet in some moderate swells along Atlantic exposed shorelines. Here's a look now at your national forecast. A look at your extended forecast over the next couple of days. Showers and isolated thunderstorms possible, but by next week we expect that low pressure system, as I mentioned, to take shape. It could be subtropical or tropical, and it will produce some showers and thunderstorms across us, so we're asking you to monitor that. That's a look at our weather. Make it a safe night, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks so much, Greg. Well, hundreds of public servants showed up and showed out for the Public Service Float Parade, ending Public Service Week with a bang. It was a chance for workers to celebrate the public sector. Parade Judge Charmaine Roll confirming more than 20 government agencies participated, decorating trucks and cars with T-shirts to rep their departments. And they were not just there to party, says State Minister for the Public Service, Pia Glover Roll.
The judges prejudge from about 9 to 10, and then on the road we have them positioned in 7 to 8 different zone areas.
You can feel the energy that's in the air today, and I spent some time in the public service, so I can appreciate, I can relate to the many good things that public servants do and have done.
All right, looks like a lot of fun. And to see that or any of your favorite stories from tonight or anytime this week, you can head on over to ournews.bs, or you can like and share right from the Our News Facebook page. With that, we thank you for joining us for Our News tonight. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Natalia Hall. We'll see you tomorrow night. Our Megan Shepard is back in the seat. Have a great weekend.